So our speaker for this week's HIGI is Leigh Singh, who will be presenting a speech entitled "A Reason, a Season, or a Lifetime." Over a course of our lives, it is natural for us to gain and lose relationships with others. Sometimes we meet a new friend or we break up with a long-term partner. Whether it is familial, platonic, romantic, or professional connection, our relationships in life are constantly evolving. Leigh will be discussing how she has noticed the relationships in her life changing over the years and the ways in which she navigates this. What is your attitude towards losing a connection? How have you noticed your relationship changing as you age? Do you believe that length of a relationship is an accurate measure of its depth? Feel free to keep these questions in mind as you listen to the speech. Please help me welcome Leigh.
Thank you, Shankavi. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to begin. Um, when I was younger, around elementary school age, I honestly didn't really give much thought into the relationships that I had at the time. They all seemed to be preset or organized for me in some way. For instance, in terms of my family, I was born into a big one consisting of my mom, dad, brother, and lots of close aunts, uncles, and cousins. When it came to friends, it was whoever I happened to be sitting closest to in my classes. My mom had also put me in piano lessons around that time, where I met a great piano teacher, and that was about it. Being a family member, a friend, and a student were pretty much the extent of all the relationships that I had at the time, and it seemed as if they were all determined by someone else. Of course, I couldn't choose what family I was born into. The teachers at school decided who'd be in their classes and the seating arrangement, and my mom decided what piano school I'd attend. So I didn't really have to actively seek out any of these relationships for myself. And looking back, it's probably why building relationships back then seemed easier to come by than they do now. Furthermore, in all of these different relationships, I assumed permanence, that my family would always be there, our bond would always be strong, that I'd be best friends forever with all my friends from elementary, middle, and high school, and that I'd never stop going to piano lessons. But of course, I'd eventually find out that this wasn't true. And so that brings us to present day me. And as was said in the introduction, in recent years, I've become more aware of the changing relationships in my life. To name a few, unfortunately, I had an uncle who recently passed away. Um, I haven't seen my friend from university for about 2 years now due to the pandemic. And so our relationship has been purely virtual, as I'm sure has been the case for many. I've also lost contact with some of my childhood friends. And so, with all of these instances, they made me reflect on why were all these changes happening in the first place. Of course, something like death is a natural occurrence, it's unavoidable. And a global pandemic, that can throw a wrench into how we experience life in general. Um, but the lost or waning connections that I had with others couldn't only be explained by those two things. So through some self-reflection and thinking about it long and hard, I came up with three main factors that I think can either make or break a relationship. And if any of you guys can think of any others, I'd love to hear it. So the first would be time. In entering university, I realized that I was no longer doing the exact same thing as all of my friends were. Many of us went to different universities. We were no longer confined to the same space in the way that we were in elementary or middle or high school. We no longer had the same schedules, and suddenly everyone became so busy, busy trying to balance their own lives, whether it be classes, work, volunteering, clubs, and so on. It suddenly became harder to find the time to talk to each other. The second factor that kind of goes hand in hand with time is energy. I learned that it requires energy to maintain any kind of relationship. It takes energy to be the first one to reach out, to ask to hang out, or to even pick up the phone and call. It takes effort to rearrange your own schedule for someone else or to be understanding when they aren't able to. And lastly, I believe the third factor has to do with interests. So, as humans, we're constantly growing, we're gaining new experiences, interests, hobbies, and sometimes those interests no longer coincide with the interests of your friends. And sometimes you may actually be more compatible with someone else based on those new interests. Without the ability to make time or to put in the necessary energy or to engage in similar interests, it may feel like your life has misaligned with some of the people who you were once extremely close to. And regardless of knowing that these barriers can exist and that not everyone that you meet will stay in your life forever, it's still difficult when any kind of relationship comes to an end, whether it be romantic, platonic, familial, or professional. You might feel heartbroken or disappointed, maybe even angry or abandoned. And in response, it's sometimes easy to cast blame on either yourself or the other person for why the relationship had to come to an end. Like it was because she said this or he did that. Or sometimes you think of things you wish you could have said to them in the moment or as if they were still there. But in my opinion, that often gets you nowhere. Actually, it may make me feel even worse about the situation. However, I found something that does help me work through those feelings, and it's in the form of a poem that I want to share with you guys. And it's by an unknown author, and it's called A Reason, a Season, or a Lifetime. And I'm just going to share that with you guys right now. Okay, I'm going to read it out loud. It says, people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. When you figure out which one it is, you will know what to do for each person. When someone is in your life for a reason, it's usually to meet a need you have expressed. They've come to assist you through a difficulty, to provide you with guidance and support, to aid you physically, emotionally, or spiritually. They may seem like a godsend, and they are. They are there for the reason you need them to be. Then, without any wrongdoing on your part or at an inconvenient time, this person will say or do something to bring the relationship to an end. Sometimes they die, sometimes they walk away, sometimes they act up and force you to take a stand. What we must realize is that our need has been met, our desire fulfilled, their work is done. The prayer you sent up has been answered, and now it is time to move on. Some people come into your life for a season because your turn has come to share, grow, or learn. They bring you an experience of peace or make you laugh. They may teach you something you've never done. They usually give you an unbelievable amount of joy. Believe it, it is real, but only for a season. Lifetime relationships teach you lifetime lessons, things you must build upon in order to have a solid emotional foundation. Your job is to accept the lesson, love the person, and put what you have learned to use in all other relationships and areas of your life. It is said that love is blind, but friendship is clairvoyant. And so this poem has taught me many things. It's taught me that it's okay if a relationship doesn't always turn out to be permanent, that although when you find a good friend or a good partner or a good mentor, you may want them to stay in your life forever, but it's natural if it doesn't. It may even mean that you're simply growing into a new stage of your life and making room for new people to come along. It's also taught me that regardless of how long someone comes into your life, they can still make a profound impact on you and they can help shape you as a person. Because when you take every relationship as an opportunity to learn something new about yourself, there can never really be a bad relationship. Sometimes it's in their presence where you learn something new. For instance, the other person may exhibit qualities that you look up to and that you maybe want to adopt for yourself. Or sometimes it's in their absence where you learn something, like that maybe you yourself are a whole person and that you're capable of moving forward without them. And that's what I've been trying to do to navigate the lost connections in my life, which is thinking of the lessons that they've taught me. So, from certain lost friendships, I've learned the importance of being vulnerable, of being honest, to also recognize when a relationship is no longer serving you, and to even work on my people pleasing tendencies, because those can get out of hand sometimes. I've realized that these relationships have helped me grow as an individual and have taught me things I can apply to new connections in my life. And for all of that, I'm very grateful for them. But not to worry, I've gained some new relationships too. In recent years, I eventually realized that I couldn't just sit around and wait for new ones to come to me in the way that I'd grown accustomed to when I was younger. It finally clicked that now I had to take control over the relationships that I allowed in my life and to put in the necessary time and energy to develop them. To name a few examples, in the past year, I ended up reconnecting with a childhood friend of mine, and we've been growing closer. And it's been fun to see how we both matured the last time we were friends. And it's also fun to see how we're still a little immature. I've also tried to step out of my familiar bubble and to put myself out there, as they say, and meet new people. Um, I met a great mentor. She's an occupational therapist that I shadow, and she's like very supportive, and I learn a lot from her. I also joined H2O, where I met all of you, whom I learn a lot from each week. That also includes Miss Paulina, who sometimes comes, and she's also in the Positive Thinkers group. She's very kind and generous, and I meet up with her sometimes at the library. It's a great time. And so I was able to make connections with people who I may not have met otherwise if I stayed in my normal routine and if I didn't actively seek them out myself. So just to conclude, it's natural for our relationships in life to change or evolve with time. And although some may not last as long as we had hoped, it doesn't mean they were failed relationships or something to regret. We can learn a lot from them, and we can make the effort to form new ones using those very same lessons we learned from the old ones. And while that brings me to the end of my speech, I'd love to hear the attitudes that any of you have when losing a connection. Maybe for some of the older adults here, if you've noticed relationships changing more or less as you get older. And can you think of any relationship in your life that's been for a reason, a season, or a lifetime? Or any other comments you wish to share? Thank you.